It might be the offseason, but the drama never stops with our favorite team, the Angels. Who's in court? Who's in charge? And who is up for a gold glove?
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. The civil trial between the Angels and the Skaggs family has begun. There are more names tied to the Angels for the managerial position, and a new team is interested in Albert Pujols. And Luis Rengifo was nominated for a gold glove at second base. How in the world did that happen? Before we talk Angels baseball, I want to thank our sponsor, FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet for just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download FanDuel today. Thanks for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch brothers here with you normally, the Super Halo Bros. My name is John. My brother Mike isn't here today, but he'll be back with us on Monday. We've been fans of this team for years, and we just finished our fourth season as the host of Locked On Angels. We're talking Angels baseball Monday through Friday, every single weekday with you. It's the place to be, especially during the offseason when there's so much news around our favorite team. And even though they disappoint us on the field, we still love them. We still talk about them, and they're still our favorites. And there's a lot of drama around the Halos right now. In fact, the Tyler Skaggs civil trial has begun this week. Sam Blum of The Athletic has been doing an incredible job covering what's happened so far. Check out his work on The Athletic, and also follow him on Twitter because he's been providing a lot of real-time updates. Jury selection took a while due to the judge trying to seek jurors without potential biases. And you can imagine how difficult that would be when you have people who live in Orange County, where this trial is taking place, in Santa Ana. They might be fans of the team. They might not be fans of this team. They also might be like you and me, who are upset about the way things have gone for this team over the last 10 years or so. Some of them want Artie to sell. Some of them just show up and have a good time at the game, and that's okay too. But you can imagine how hard it is to select jurors who might have a hard time for their decision-making not to be influenced by their love or lack of love for the team. So that did take a while, but the trial has already begun. Now, this case comes down to two arguments, one from the Skaggs family and one from the Angels. In this trial, the Skaggs family attorneys will argue that Angels' former communication director, Eric Kay, was using illegal drugs, and he was providing illegal opioids to Skaggs and others. Skaggs attorneys are arguing that the Angels did not act on Eric Kay's extreme behavior, and that his addiction issues that he displayed throughout his tenure went unaddressed. On the other hand, the Angels are going to argue that that Tyler Skaggs' actions were reckless, and that it was a lethal dose of oxycodone, fentanyl, and alcohol were responsible for him tragically passing away. So it really comes down to who bears the brunt of the responsibility here. That's what lawyers on both sides are going to be arguing in court. Remember, there was a criminal trial of Eric Kay that already took place. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison. This is a civil trial, and essentially it's money on the line. What's at stake here are the damages the Skaggs family feels like they're owed, and that's why they are suing the team here. The burden of proof, so to speak, is a lot lower in a civil trial versus a criminal trial, but we already do know that Eric Kay, former employee for the Angels, communication director, was sentenced to prison. Now, there's going to be a lot that comes out about this trial, and Mike and I are certainly going to discuss that here on the show. And so with the beginning of this trial, I want everybody who listens to us, watches us, and discusses this topic with us to be aware of something. I want to make something very clear. This is a sensitive and emotional story. It touches on loss, responsibility, and the way that organizations operate. And I know this topic can bring out a lot of strong feelings, and that's okay. But I want to set the tone for how we're going to talk about it here. We're going to lead here with empathy, honesty, and respect for everybody involved. And that includes the Skaggs family. That includes Eric Kay's family, who already have to deal with the fact that he's in prison for 22 years, where he was sentenced to 22 years. So there's three things, guys, that I want to address. And the first one is the potential sale of the team. Now, I know that if the Angels lose this lawsuit, there could be some major financial consequences. And one possible ripple effect is that Artie Moreno might finally have to sell the team. And I'll be honest, you guys know that Mike and I would love for Artie Moreno to sell this team. But I've been racking my brain on this, and I've been trying to figure out a delicate way to say this. And I think it's really important. I'm not going to root for the Skaggs family to win as some sort of a shortcut to a sale. This isn't about what us fans want on the business side. This is a case about a man's death, the organization's responsibilities, and most importantly, accountability. And if Artie sells because of what happened here, that's a byproduct. It's not a reason we should be cheering for or against anybody in court. And this is not meant to say, I think you're a bad person if you've been thinking that Artie is going to sell the team if he loses. That's not what this is about. It's more about setting a boundary in how we discuss and approach this conversation. So again, yes, a team sale might be the result of what happens here. It could be a ripple effect, but it's not something to root for the Skaggs family because we as fans want it to be that way. Does that make sense? So again, I'm not trying to put anybody down who might feel that way, but I think that's just a careful line that we need to walk here, right? The second thing is about Tyler's own addiction and what that means. A lot of reactions that I've seen from fans over the years has been nobody's forced him to take drugs. He made his own choices. And look, I understand why that might be some people's first reaction. It's honestly a way of making sense of something tragic, but addiction is not about choices in the way that you and I make choices every day with our everyday decisions. Addiction is a sickness. It literally rewires your brain. And when we say, oh, he made his choices, I think that does a dangerous thing. I think it unintentionally erases the fact that Tyler was struggling with a very real disease. And acknowledging that doesn't absolve anyone of any personal responsibility, but it does change the way we talk about what happened. I think it shifts the tone from blaming to understanding. And the same can be said about Eric Kay and his addiction. And I know that there's going to be people who come into our comments, and I've seen those comments all over the internet. They're all over the articles about Tyler Skaggs. But one, they probably haven't watched our show and they're just going to fire off that comment. And two, Mike and I are just going to ignore those comments, just to be honest with you. Because if someone's contributing that to the conversation, it's not worth engaging with, in my opinion, because it's such a, how do I say it? Smoking was, safe for pregnant women in the 1950s, right? And viewing addiction in 2025, the way that people sometimes describe it is very antiquated. That's an old point of view that doesn't apply anymore. And again, I'm not saying this to shame anyone. I'm saying this in hopes that if you're one of those people who says, well, Tyler made his choices, nobody forced him to take drugs, I invite you to broaden your perspective on what it means to know somebody who has suffered from addiction. And finally, the third point I want to make is this. And that's why this case is happening. Tyler Skaggs obviously had an addiction problem. And he had one that appears to exist even before his time with the Angels. And I think that's significant because he certainly had the means of getting illegal drugs when he wanted them. The issue here is that he got them from someone inside the Angels organization, Eric Kay, who's already criminally liable according to the state of California. Also, Matt Harvey, who testified under immunity during the Kay trial that he provided Skaggs with drugs. And that's why this civil trial exists. It's not because the Skaggs family is saying the team created his addiction, but because the drugs that killed him were tied to someone employed by the team. And that crosses into organizational responsibility. And this is the main crux of it all that I think we should all understand. Even if Tyler's addiction existed before, the moment, the instance, it involves an employee and team resources, it becomes something bigger than just his personal choices. So that's the framework that Mike and I want us to have here. We can have the tough conversations. We can disagree, but we do need to talk about this with respect for Tyler as a human being, respect for Eric Kay as a human being, for Tyler's family pain, the Kay's family pain, and mostly we need to be able to talk about this because of the real implications that this has for the Angels organization. It's not about winning an argument. It's all about understanding what's actually at stake here. So those are going to be the ground rules as we continue to talk about this trial. And I hope that that's clear. I hope that that's fair. And I hope that we can continue to have conversations about this trial as the news continues to break. Again, Sam Blum is doing an incredible job covering that. And I hope that you'll join us just so we can keep you informed as Angel fans, our everydayers, and people that we honestly respect. And so we appreciate you joining us in that as well. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Coming up, the Angels managerial search seemed to be pretty clear cut with Albert Pujols, but there's been some new developments that could impact who's managing the team in 2026. And we're going to tell you about those coming right up. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. It's the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make wrong calls, right calls when it comes to sports every single day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. And with football back, you can take your pick. It's the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action is Prize Picks. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. So download the Prize Picks app today, use the code LOCKEDONMLB, and you're going to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB, all one word, all capital letters, for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. This is the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Again, I'm Jon Frisch, one half of the Super Halo Bros. Mike will be back with us on Monday. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcast. You can watch us on your smart TV and on YouTube. And whether you're watching or listening, come on over to YouTube, find today's show, and get in the conversation by jumping in the comments section. And also hit that like and subscribe button. You're going to want to be subscribed because we have tons of stuff to cover here in the offseason as Angel fans. And also be sure to hit us up on social media at Locked On Angels, at Super Halo Bros. And we'd love to connect with you there as well. Now, what seemed pretty clear, or at least to be a clear path to the next Angels manager, has gotten a bit more complicated over the last day or two. And what began as Albert Pujols being somewhat of a shoe-in for the position has changed a little bit due to interest from other teams and also some other candidates emerging for the Angels position. So let's rewind. Last week, Angels GM Perry Minasi and GM PM spoke with Albert in St. Louis in an interview that many believed went very well. Then earlier this week, there was a segment on MLB Network that reported a list of potential candidates that were tied to the Angels managerial job. And shortly after that, there was reporting that the Orioles were interested in having Pujols come in to interview for the managerial position and be their manager in 2026. And just yesterday, a source within the team told Sam Blum of The Athletic that the Angels are broadening their search for a manager. Now, Albert does remain the favorite, but Yadier Molina, according to the source, has decided he wants to have a more thorough process. Now, Perry Minasian is set to interview Torrey Hunter and Kurt Suzuki. They are both technically with the organization as special assistants to the team. Some of the other names that have come up, Nick Hundley, longtime Padres catcher, current Rangers special assistant, Ryan Flaherty, who you might remember as an Orioles infielder and current bench coach of the Chicago Cubs. Brandon Hyde, ironically enough, former Orioles manager who was let go early this season. He's the one that was fired after the Orioles got off to that bad start. But he's seen this young Orioles team grow under his watch. And it's ironic because now the Orioles are interested in Pujols. And then finally, possibly, Rocco Baldelli, who was just let go from being the manager of the Twins. And so with all that said, Albert still remains the favorite and also the front runner so far. But I think it leads to some questions. I think it opens up the door for us to speculate wildly, right? You know how much I love doing that on the show. So I'm going to start here. First, I am personally surprised that Yadier Molina has wanted to broaden the search for a new manager, because you and I know that he typically gets what he wants when it comes down to club decisions. That's nothing new. So I think it's a number of things. Is it possible that he's expanding the search with the news that other teams are interested in Albert Pujols? Right. The Orioles are the first team that seems to be interested, and I'm sure there are a number of teams interested in Albert because there are a number of managerial openings this offseason, kind of an unprecedented number, to be honest with you. Now, if he expanded the search because Albert is drawing interest from other teams, that would make sense. And it doesn't hurt to have other options interviewed if Albert doesn't end up managing in Anaheim. The second thing that is interesting to me, if Artie is actually doing his due diligence, interviewing multiple candidates, isn't that what he's supposed to do, right? And I know GMPM's handling the interviews, but to me, that's a surprising move considering we all know how this team is actually ran. But the thing is, pretty much all these candidates are worthy candidates. There's nothing wrong with the guys that were named there. So for them to do their due diligence and interview multiple candidates for the managerial position, I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just not something that I would expect Yadier Molina to do. Mike and I certainly have our favorites when it comes to who could be this manager, but they're all very good choices for the most part. There's definitely some that are more exciting than others, right? Like Torrey Hunter would be an exciting pickup, but Brandon Hyde is somebody who's done it before. So, and Rocco Baldelli as well. So I think that there's pros and cons here. And finally, I think we have to consider, is it possible that maybe in conversations with Perry Minasian, did Albert seem to indicate that he wants too much? Now, Mike and I have said that we feel like someone like Albert, or even a Torrey Hunter for that matter, would be able to have a lot of influence over Artie's decision-making. And we acknowledge that it would be a very Yadier Molina move to hire someone who was a former Halo back when they were good and a fan favorite. And our suspicion, though, is that it would actually benefit the team and finally get Artie to do right by the players on the field, similar to how things were when Mike Scioscia was around for most of his tenure. And perhaps there was an element of Pujols wanting a lot of power in terms of the roster construction, or at least free agency, maybe the kind of guys he wants on his coaching staff, and maybe just it comes down to money. Maybe, you know, what he's expecting to be paid as a manager. And that's not necessarily out of the question, especially for any manager, but it might be kind of hard for the Angels to accept that Yadier/Artie Moreno to accept just how much influence Pujols might want over the decision-making in the organization. Now, I know that Albert has a personal services contract with the Angels. I know that comes up a lot in conversation. A lot of people say, well, he's only going to be the manager because then Artie is already paying him, so somehow that would be a discount. I don't think that that's the case. I don't think that's going to play a factor here. Whether Albert becomes the manager or not, here or somewhere else, I don't think that personal services contract and trying to save any money is part of the conversation. But there is another factor to all of this, and that is Yadier Molina, who announced yesterday on his Instagram that, hey, I'm ready to coach. I'm ready to step in. He didn't say put me in, coach. He's saying I want to be the coach. And so there, in the conversations we've had about Albert and wherever he lands, there's been a lot made of the fact that he would want Yadier Molina as part of his staff. Now, do they come together as a pair? Not necessarily. However, Yadi hasn't really said that he's ready to coach until yesterday. And so it's good to know that he's confirmed that he's planning on coaching somewhere soon, rather than us just being like, man, if we get Albert, then we could certainly get Yadi too. And Yadi's not necessarily going to come with Pujols. But at the end of the day, I think it's important that Yadi has said, I'm ready to coach. I'm ready to do this. So we'll see how that plays a factor into all of this as well. I think the main takeaway here, though, from all of this is that early on, it felt like Pujols was kind of the sure thing, at least according to a lot of the baseball insiders and the reporting. And now it doesn't seem like it's such a sure thing. It's a little less so, but it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. But no matter what, I think it's a good thing that the Angels are doing their due diligence and interviewing a lot of candidates, despite that being Artie's decision, because that's what they ought to be doing, right? They should be interviewing a lot of people. It shouldn't just be, hey, Albert, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. This is your job if you want it. And I don't think that takes away from Pujols being their first choice either, because when he gets to interview with any team that he'd like to interview with or invites him to interview with them, I think it's important for the Angels to interview anyone that they'd like to interview for this position. So the timing's funny. I think it makes you wonder, Albert drew some interest. It seemed like, basically he was going to be the manager there, at least maybe in Artie Moreno's eyes. And then some other teams kind of came and knocking, and Albert went, well, hold on. Let me see my options out here. And to be honest, I think that the Angels finally went, okay, well, if he's going to consider his options, maybe we should too. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That's how these things should go. But it did seem to go from a pretty certain deal with Albert to a lot of things up in the air. However, I think we can all be comfortable with the fact that they're interviewing some great candidates. And so even if it doesn't end up being Albert, whoever they do interview, according to that list, I think would all be excellent options. Again, some are more exciting than others, but they're all guys who know how this game works. And whoever it is, that we're going to be covering it here on the show. So make sure you stay tuned for that, and we'll keep you posted as soon as any more managerial news comes out. Today's show is being brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you cannot miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if you win, you'll get $300 in bonus bets. So all you have to do, pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the entire app. And there's so many different ways to play on FanDuel. I think that's one of the best parts about playing on FanDuel. You can build parlays, you can try player props, and even follow the live lines during the game. So whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats like me, you guys know I'm a stats nerd, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app and get started. Here's something that I don't think anyone expected to hear this week. Luis Rengifo has been nominated for an American League Gold Glove at second base. Now, let's be fair. Rengifo has been a great player for the Angels in terms of defensive versatility. He can play second, third base, shortstop. He's played the outfield. The thing is, and we've talked about this many, many times on the show, he's not someone who plays any of those spots at an elite level. And usually that's the trade-off when you have a guy who can play all over the place. It's like, yeah, he can cover for us. However, he's not going to do anything in particularly great. He could be fine at some of these positions. And the truth is that in his career, his most quote-unquote fine position has been second base. If you want Rengifo to play the field, second is his best position. So I was just quite surprised to find out. And some of you everydayers were as well. I saw the comments of, Luis Rengifo? What? I think your voices went up like mine does too. So let's dive into the stats and figure out if Rengifo is worthy of this nod at Gold Glove for second base this year. This year, he had a .988 fielding percentage at second base. Now remember, 1,000 is perfect, right? Anything below 980, fielding percentage is funny in that way. Anything like below 980, you kind of raise your eyebrows a little bit. So for him to be at 988, that's a pretty solid fielding percentage, given how many innings he's played at second base. In fact, that's the best he's ever been in his career at second base, and that's the best fielding percentage he's put up at any infield position that he's played more than 10 times in a single season. For the first time in his career, Luis Rengifo was above average in outs above average and defensive runs saved for the first time anywhere in his career. At second base, he had 4 outs above average, positive 4, meaning he made plays, at least 4, that don't typically get made. Then he had a positive 5 defensive runs saved. And that's kind of more of a Fangraphs stat, but it's similar to outs above average, but it's also a little bit different, but they both tell you this is a good defender. For reference, last year at second base, Luis Rengifo had a negative 4 outs above average and a negative 2 defensive runs saved over at second. So he's greatly improved over the last year. So the next thing I want to look into is, how does he compare to other second basemen in the American League? Well, first up, Andrés Giménez from the Blue Jays and Marcus Semien from the Rangers. They are also in the running for the second base Gold Glove in the American League. Now, Andrés Giménez has a positive 10 outs above average and a positive 9 defensive runs saved this year at second. Marcus Semien has a positive 7 outs above average and a positive 5 defensive runs saved. Second, let's look at where StatCast places Luis Rengifo among second basemen across all of baseball. Now, StatCast uses a metric called fielding run value to score a player, and this is their definition. It's their overall metric for capturing a player's measurable defensive performance onto a run-based scale, converting various metrics like outs above average, blocking, framing, all of those things. They kind of put it in a run-based format. So where does Luis Rengifo rank in terms of fielding run value? Well, among all second basemen with a minimum of 500 innings at second base this year, Rengifo ranks 5th, including those in the National League. Nico Horner of the Cubs is in first with 12 fielding run value. Xavier Edwards of the Marlins is second with 7. Andrés Giménez ranks 3rd with 7. Marcus Semien ranks 4th with 6. And of course, Rengifo with 5 in the 5th spot. And Rengifo is actually among some pretty good company. Matt McClain of the Reds, Daniel Schneemann of the Guardians, and Jazz Chisholm of the Yankees all have 5 fielding run value for second baseman. And if you take away the National League guys, Rengifo is 3rd in the American League. Of course, he's behind Giménez and Semien in fielding run value. So can Rengifo actually win this Gold Glove? Could he actually win this thing? Well, unfortunately for Rengifo, it's definitely going to be Andres Gimenez's award to win, right? His defensive numbers are significantly better than Rengifo's and also Marcus Semien. But I will say, credit to Louis for actually being nominated and having the kind of season he had at second base. Now, how did this happen? And why did it take us all by surprise? Well, to me, I think his performance at second base went under the radar, especially among Angel fans, everydayers, with Mike and I, right? I think that this was way under the radar at second. And maybe that's because we're so used to him playing all over the place that we never really saw him do any position that well. And we just kind of assumed that, yeah, he's fine. He's not the greatest, but he's fine. That said, second base historically is his best position. And honestly, props to him. It's great to see him have success there this season. Wherever he lands in free agency, I think he should be at second base. Off the top of my head, I remember saying that I think the Tigers would be a great spot for Luis Rengifo, and for him to play second base, I think would be significant. Who's at second base right now for the Tigers? Is it Colt Keith? I can't quite remember, but I'll look that up. Either way, congrats to Louis. He might not win the Gold Glove, but to be nominated shows a tremendous improvement in his game defensively over where he's been, and certainly what we have seen over the course of his career as Angel fans. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. For your second listen, you got to check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night until a World Series champion is crowned. You can get local analysis on a national scale. Join my friends over on MLB Game Night. They do a great job. Find it on Locked On MLB YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hey, be sure you give us a follow on Twitter at Locked On Angels and also at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram, whether you're watching or listening. Come on over to today's show on YouTube, get in the comments section because we'd love to hear from you there. On Monday, we're going to keep you up to date on all things Halos. There's a lot going on, so be sure that you're subscribed. Don't forget to join the conversation with us on YouTube in the comments section. Also hit us up on social media. Mike's going to be back with us on Monday. We're looking forward to that. And again, any breaking news that comes out about this team, whether it's managerial stuff or something else, we'll have it for you on social media and, of course, as a YouTube short as well. And we'll talk about it all on Monday. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday.